Right, so this morning we are speaking about Parasha Vayera from Genesis 18:1 till 22 verse unknown. Can't remember where it ends. 22, chapter 22. So Vayera is an interesting parasha, and it's a parasha about life and death. It is about, and Cian confirmed it this morning, it is about the father's attempt and his calling into our lives for restoration of every area of our life. And he does so by various means. He achieves that by leading us in the way of righteousness and leading us down a path. And his hand is outstretched to you and I and the people around us for the purpose of restoration, to get us back into a full relationship and a place where we should be, that we can live out his covenantal truths with each other and among each other. So, starts at the portion, this is the portion that I'm focusing on. It's not where it ends, that's just what I focus on. And parasha usually contains a primary theme. It's centered around a central thought. But today's parasha has got two stories primarily. Actually three. I haven't seen the relation to the third one of Avimelech. Avram going to Avimelech, and you know everything that happened. We read it this morning. I haven't seen the first two stories' alignment to the third, but as I sat here listening to the word this morning, that's why it's important. We need to come and read scriptures aloud so that we can hear it. And as you hear it being read out loud, you suddenly click. There's something more. So the third story of this parasha has got a direct relation to the first two. So what's the first two? It's the story of a promise of a son to Avram and Sarah. And it's related to the destruction of Sedom and Gomorrah. How do we put those two stories together that it tells the same story? You know? It's interesting. It's, I think, it might be a little bit long. So, forewarned. Midtime, so during the story, we will just stand up. We will look at the message that approaches us, like Abraham did at his tent. I'll give you a second just to stretch the legs, but it might be a little bit longer than usual. I'm sorry that it's going to be. But it tells a story about fruitfulness and barrenness. This is the comparison. It tells a story about Abraham and Lot. Do you know what Lot's name means? Do you know what it means? Avraham means what? Father of many nations. Okay? What does Lot mean? Not a lot, but it means something. So, Lot is a Lamed, Vav, and a Tet. So, what's a Lamed? That's a shepherd's staff. This is a connector, man typically, and this is a basket. Not a pretty basket, but it is a basket, at least. So, what will that mean? Do you know the name Lot actually means coverings? Coverings. So what does that story mean? What can we say? This is the teaching. That's a teaching that man puts in a basket. It covers the teaching. Lot grew up in the household of Abraham. He knew the teachings of righteousness. He knows the teachings of righteousness. What does he do with it? Now what Matthew says, and this I think is the writer of Matthew, I think that's what he got it. He says, nor do they light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a lampstand, and it shines to all those in the house. Let your light so shine before men that they see your good works and praise your Father who is in the heavens. So what was Lot's success rate in achieving disciples in Sedom and Gomorrah? Not a lot. So this is the story of light and darkness in these two stories combined. And I think as we read it, I hope it will become clearer. Maybe the light will shine. Genesis 18 says, seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. For I know him. That's first thing is, our Father knows him. You see that? Our father knows that Abraham will become a great and mighty nation. Which means, through the son that our father will give him, and through Isaac, he will become a great and mighty nation. But the point of the matter is, our father, it's Yadati. That word is, I know him as Yadati. I know him intimately. That he will command his children and his household after him, and they will keep the Derech Adonai to do justice. Justice is tzedakah. It is the work. Matthew 25 is the works of tzedakah. It is acting in loving kindness and in righteousness to your neighbor. Remember Matthew 25, Messiah asked, the story goes that I was hungry and you fed me, and I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink, I was naked and you clothed me. That's the work of tzedakah. That is being compassionate to the people that visit you. He does tzedakah, and that's in the feminine form, by the way. I checked it a couple of times. It's not tzedek, as righteousness. It's tzedakah, feminine form. And judgment, mishpatim, that Yotevavhe may bring upon Abraham that which he has spoken of him. So, how will the things that our father spoke about Abraham come upon him? How will it happen? Because he will command his children in his household after him, and they will walk in the ways of righteousness and in justice and keeping in the ways of our father and walking as a friend with our father. That is the way, through relationship. That's how it happens. But then verse 20 goes on, and this is more the story in darkness. It switches over to and this is a link between the story of Sedom and Isaac. Verse 20 says, and Adonai said, because the cry of Sedom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous. Does our father know them intimately? He says, I will go down now and see. So, it's a place that the intentions and what's happening on the ground requires our father to go down and see what happens. When last did we see this? In Babylon. In Babylon, when the father went down and judged them with the confusion of languages. I will go down and see whether they have done it all according to the cry of the city, which is come unto me. And if not, I will know. So I think the comparison there between those two is that our father, knowing Abraham through relationship, will bless Abraham, and he's already blessed Abraham, and he will grow through his son and his family to grow into a big and mighty nation, showing the glory and the goodness of our Father on the earth, in comparison to the next verse of Sedom and Gomorrah that Lot is living in, but the wickedness and sin is overwhelming it to the point where our Father will go down and see if he must judge it. So, I think if we think about the bearing of these texts on this day that we are living in. Excuse me. So the nation of our Father lives in his presence. He knows what's happening with them, and he leads them and he guides them. And I think if we think about this, make a comparison between Abraham's day and the day that we're living in, it can become quite an interesting discussion, but I will leave that to the end. So, there is a key phrase in this whole story, though, and the key phrase is in verse 22 when the three visitors stand up, the two of them leave, and the one that represents himself as Yotevavhe, stands with Abraham. And it's a little bit of a controversial text. It says, so the men turned away from there and went towards Sedom, but Yotevavhe still stood before Abraham. So, and this, if you read in your Bibles, you'll find it the other way around. It says that Abraham stood before Yotevavhe. Because the word that's mentioned there for standing before is one of a lower status standing before one of a higher status. That's why in the Masoretic text, in the Biblia Stuttergenza, you can read all about it on page 38. It says that in the year 910 about, the Masoretes changed it around this is one of the things that's been changed to say that Abraham stood before Yotevavhe, not the other way around. Out of a theological problem, saying that our father couldn't possibly stand before Abraham. So if you read this in your Bible, in the King James and all the other translations that derive from it, it'll be the other way around. Okay, that's a rabbit trail. I shouldn't go in that direction too far. But it's important. So the key phrase is, Abraham stands up from his tent where he sat, had a meal with the messengers, and with Jehovah went to a precipice where they looked over Sedom and making intercession for it. Okay, verse 22. Verse 23. Then Abraham drew near and said, Will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Which made me thought about the idea in Luke 18:7. It says, And shall not God avenge his elect that cry to him day and night, and that he is long-suffering over them? And I say to you that he will avenge them, those that is his elect, will avenge them speedily. Nevertheless, the Son of Man comes, and he will find faith on the earth. When the Son of Man comes, shall he find faith on the earth? This is the problem in Sedom. When he comes to judge, when he goes down to see the condition of Sedom, will he find faith in Sedom? This is the thing. So what is the story? Will he indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked? So what are we thinking about? What's the crucial message of the story? Is will what happened to Lot happen to the 50? Okay, will the righteous be swept away with the wicked? Okay, that's the story. Verse 24. Suppose there are 50 righteous, says Abraham to the father, within the city. Will you then sweep away will he sweep away the righteous who are in it? And if we can look at the Hebrew of it, let's just keep the Hebrew there for now. We'll get back to that. Actually, when you read this out, thinking about what the text says, it says, let's just read it again. Then Abraham drew near and said, Will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked? The next verse, though, says, Suppose there are 50 righteous within the city. Then will you sweep away the place and not spare the place, Sedom? So if there are a representative body of believers in Sedom, will you sweep it away? So, and not spare it. For even the testimony, that's my insert. Sorry, that's just to create a little bit of an understanding. So, will you sweep away the place and not spare it? For even with the testimony of the 50 of the righteous who are in it. So, will you demolish that whole area with the righteous in it? And I think this is the cry of Abraham. And they start negotiating how many people it can be, down to 10 people at quorum. So and I think if we work through the Hebrew of it, it says there are tzadikim. Let me just see if I can highlight it. There are tzadikim betoch ha'ir, and that's the word ha'av. And ha'av is an interesting word. The next one is tispe. It's like a broom. Tispe. Nice. So, will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? And that word only occurs twice in the Torah. And it's in both the story of Sedom and the story of Isaac, which is a connector between the two stories. Ha'av. And so, in Abraham's story, in Abraham's request, his intercession, what is the basis of his argument? Why is he asking this? Is it as an outcry for the wicked so that they might be saved? Is that the focus of his story? Okay, we need to have a discussion. What do you think? Is it because out of mercy towards the wicked that it's asking the question, that he intercede? Or is it on the basis of justice? Chris? He's asking a question. Yeah. Yeah.
Are you really going to kill 50 good people because there's 5 million bad people or 5,000 bad people?
Yeah. Exactly. So this is the focus that we place on the... Yeah, so I think in this takes our focus back to Gaza at the moment. What are we doing in Gaza? What are we doing? What Israel's strategy at the moment, as far as I can see it, is that they're removing the people that are not actively involved, removing them to deal with the those that are actively involved. And I think this is the strategy of what Israel is doing at the moment. So what he is saying is, will the righteous suffer with the wicked? Is that what we're saying? All right. So his basis is to the judge of all the earth, and he says in verse 25, will that be far from you to do after this manner, to slay the righteous with the wicked, so that the righteous should be as the wicked? That will be far from you. Shall not the judge, the shofet of the earth, do with justice, act justly? And so Abraham's request is all about the saving of the experience of Sedom. And verse 26, let's just read verse 26. And Adonai said, if I find in Sedom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare. But the word is not save as in the connection with Yeshua, as in save, salvation. He says he will nasa, he will bear them up, he will lift them up. He says, then I will lift up all the place for their sake. The idea of restoration. The idea of, if there are 50 people in the city, what will I do to the city? Is I will lift up the place for the sake of the 50. Because what is happening in the city? If there are 50 people living in the city with a testimony of righteousness and in the ways of our Father, living in His presence, then the Father will delay judgment to the whole place. That's basically the request. So they negotiate the numbers, and it goes down. Let's just look at this verse 24. Verse 24 is a interesting verse, because that word ha'af is that I spoke about. That word indeed is occur here. I think I've got a note of that. It occurs here and in the story of Isaac, and then only in the prophetic books. All right. So no. In Deuteronomy it speaks about a nose, and a nose is ha'af as well, but not in the context of ha'af. So it's. I think what he says, what Abraham asks is, will you really, being the judge of the earth that acts in righteousness and in justice, will you really destroy everybody together? The good and the wicked, the righteous and the wicked. Will you destroy them together? 18 verse 13 says, the father said unto Abraham, this is the other place that it's mentioned. He said to Abraham, wherefore did Sarah laugh, saying, shall I of a surety bear a child, which I'm old? So what is the message to Sarah? Sarah laughs within herself and saying, will I really bear a child, seeing that everything is dead that can produce a child within me? What happened in Sodom? Is Sodom alive or is it dead? Sodom dead. Sodom is dead. But Sarah's body and the ability to produce a child is dead. So to what measure will the Father restore to produce life from it? And this is the story for our lives. There's areas of our lives that's under threat of dying. And if we submit our lives and we submit that area in our life to our Father, He can restore to bring life and righteousness from it. So, as I said in this chapter, in Sodom and in Sarah, the story is it's mentioned, and in anger, it's mentioned in Devarim, just the word ha'af. And I think that word is a link between the two stories that is in the text. So that was interesting to me. So if we look at the fruitfulness and the barrenness of Sodom and Gomorrah and the promise of a son of Isaac, then let's look at the things that's common. And I think there are a surprising number of things that is common between these two stories. Firstly, why is the detail necessary of an old man, almost 100 years old, sitting at the entrance to his tent in the heat of the day? And then he looks up, he lifts up his eyes, and he sees messengers coming. Then he runs out to the messengers, he bows down before them, and invites them back into his tent. Do you think this really makes a difference to the biblical text if we left that scenario out? But every little detail that we see is necessary to paint a story. So he brings them into his tent with with lots of activity and zeal. He washes their feet. You know the story. He get them some water. He commands his household to slaughter the best. He gets milk, gets his wifey to bake cakes. They've got a feast. All right. What happens in Sedom? What happens when the messengers came to Sedom? What was the reaction? It's again, and this is the links between the stories. As Abraham sat at the tent of his door, so Lot sat at the gates of the city. The messengers came. What did Lot do? Not a lot. He got up. He saw them coming. He didn't run out to them. He met them some ways, and he invited them in. So he's got the kindness that he learned in Abraham's household. He's got that, and he applies that to a certain extent. So if you look at the first thing that's binding the two stories together, it's the announcement of the promise of a son, that ha'av. You remember that word, but that same word will bring judgment on Sedom and rescue Lot. So the promise of a son and the judgment is linked by the same word that's used in the text. The messengers that come as agents of blessing, but they're agents of death in Sedom. Abram shows exceedingly hospitality to the men, and it brings life to his household. A son is born. Lot doesn't bring a lot of hospitality to the men, and death is reign on the city. So, anything else? Abraham will gain a child, which is his delight. And if you look at his life, he gains 318 men that are willing to lay down their lives to go and search after someone that they barely know. He's a family man. He looks after his wife. Well, Abimelech and Noah, Pharaoh. Okay, all right. Essentially, he looks after his wife. Very much so. And when his son Ishmael is born, even though he's born from another woman, he takes care of Ishmael, and he's concerned when Ishmael is about to be sent out, and he declares his love for Ishmael and says, and the father blesses Ishmael because of Abraham's love for his son. So Abraham has got a lot of value that he adds, that he invests in his family. That's where his life is. What about Lot? When the visitors come around, he is willing to give up. He gave up his 2 daughters to say, there's not enough space in my house. There's a little bit of a threat outside there. Let me give you my 2 daughters. Do with them what you want, and let the messengers come in. The men of renown. Let them come in. It's not the same heart that what Abraham has got. So I think what Lot's story is, because he is exposed to the problems of the day, he started out having the ideas and the hospitality of Abraham, but as he went on living in the city, his heart grew cold, and he became hardened, and everything else happened with him, and he ended up being corrupt. Can we say that Lot was corrupt at the end? Can we say that? I'm not sure. Maybe it's not biblical. Because later on in the New Testament, he does say that the righteous Lot was vexed by the sin. But what happened with him on the same or the next evening when he went out from the place that he lived with his daughters, by the way? And where did they get liquor? Fleeing from a city with just your clothes and your... Okay, all right. Okay, maybe they took some camels with them, that's not mentioned. Okay. So, another thing that links these 2 stories, and I think it's important because these 2 stories are opposites. They don't speak about the same realities even in my mind. But if you look at everything that connects them, it's as if the writer, when Moshe wrote the Torah on the inspiration of our Father, he intentionally created links between these stories so that we should look at them and get them in our minds, what it means for our lives and how we can apply it in our life. So, and she is laughing. If you read in verse 12, it says, let's read it here. It says, Vatzichak. Vatzichak is, she is laughing. So the basis of the word is tzachak, which is laughter, and she laughed. It is Sarah that laughed. She laughs within herself, and that is important with, bekirba. Bekirba within herself, to say after everything is gone and everything is worn out and dry, what shall we do? How is it possible to have a child? So, in Sodom's reality, it says that Chamishim Tzadikim, the 50 righteous ones, betoch inside of the Ha'ir, the city, Ha'af, that's the word that we saw before. Will you tispe, will you sweep them away? And at the bottom we find the answer. It says, the tzadikim asher bekirba. There is the same word, a feminine word in the city of Sedom, and that is a word that is exactly the same between these two portions, saying that within the city, the same reality exists that's within Sarah. So, will the Father restore Sedom as He restored Sarah? Will there be fruit coming from Sedom as there was now fruit becoming a mighty nation, living in righteousness, coming from Abraham's life? That's the question. Our Father says, let me go down and have a look. What's going on? If the cry against the sin that is within her is true or not. So, Sarah becomes a vessel. Well, it's a bit of a cold word, but she becomes a vessel of laughter. Even when the messengers speak to Abraham, says, are you laughing? Are you laughing inside here? So Sarah laughed within her. Actually, she was busy making laughter. The name of the laughter was Yitzchak. And so, Isaac is the word Yitzchak, and Sarah was restored. Her body, her life was restored to be able to bear the seed of Isaac that was in her. And Sarah in 21:6, Sarah said, God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me. Laughter is a good thing. I don't think she was reprimanded for laughing within herself of joy, of surprise, and of, is it really so? I think this was a hint to what was coming. Sedom was a vessel of? What was Sedom a vessel of? Okay to say, because it's meant to be, they were meant to be a vessel of righteousness. A city is meant to be a vessel of righteousness, but we know Sedom was not. It was a vessel of darkness, of sin. And if we look at where the righteousness is used, it is our following in the ways of our Father that makes it to be righteousness. But if you look at the word tzedek, it is, it's just about the same as, have you seen the two words next to each other? Oh my golly, can I write it? It's tzedek, whoops, daisy, it's the dalet, and what's it, the kuf at the end? Can't remember, I think so. It's tzedek, that is righteousness, and as a surprise, tzachak looks like this. It's got one line extra that makes the difference. It's sort of almost the same. So, will Sedom be able to be restored as Sarah's life is being restored? Is the people that living in Sedom, that is producing righteousness, is the seed that the Father has planted in Sedom going to be successful or not? So, could the city facilitate the growth of a seed of righteousness, like Sarah's body is now facilitating the seed of laughter that's going to grow in a city with our Father's presence as the focus? So, 2 Peter says of Lot, and he delivered righteous not, sore distressed by the lavish life of the wicked. So, the problem is, Lot's life was a teaching that a man put under a basket. And he didn't influence one person righteously in the city. What happens to the cellular development in a baby's life? It explodes and it grows and it forms a life that will eventually reproduce on its own. So the opposite happened with him. The difference between tzachak and tzedek is that is righteousness and that is laughter. A father said to Sarah, says, your wife will bear a son and you will name him Laughter, and I will establish my covenant with him, an everlasting covenant in his seed with him. And I was thinking, what about our testimony? What is our testimony like in this city? We're living in a city, here. We're living here. Not laughing now. Okay. So, Abraham pleads. What does he say? If the city contains righteousness, that's what he actually asked the Father. If that city contains a seed of righteousness that is viable, do not touch it, because then righteousness will grow and the city will be taken over with righteousness and your name will be glorified in it. Do not transplant the seed of righteousness that's within the city, because if you transplant a tree, what happens to a tree in a barren country? It normally dies. So, what is the threshold of a city? What is the threshold of the seed in a righteous city? And that's what they were busy negotiating. What is that threshold like? How many people do we need to be able to make it grow? What happened to Lot when he was transplanted out of the city? Moab and Ammon, through unrighteousness, came to exist. Do not transplant a righteous seed out of a city. That was his plea. But the seed in Lot's existence within, although he was a judge sitting at the gates, he was a man of authority. They never took hold of the seed of righteousness that was in his life. They never went on from there. So what Abraham asks is to Nasa, is to lift up the city for the sake of righteousness, if that seed is viable, if it is going to grow. Like in the life of Sarah, look at Sedom and determine if there is a seed within it, and let it live. That was Abraham's story. The problem, as we know, is the life of the Sodomites were aborted, and they had to be judged because no righteousness was found in them. But the thing is, in Abraham's life, he says, Father, if there are 50 righteous tzedekим in the city, delay judgment, because the earth is not created for judgment. The earth is created for righteousness. But because of our lack of walking in righteousness and the relationship with our Father, the earth will be judged. That's just how it works. But the primary purpose for this earth is not judgment, it is to walk in righteousness. So, if the righteousness is found in this city of George, if we live in an area that righteousness is found and it grows and it's viable, then may righteousness be, or let justice be delayed on this city, so that it can give this tree to bear fruit and so that we can live a life together and that we can flourish. So who's the righteous in Sedom? It's the one man. One man. In Abraham's life, though, righteousness is going to burst out and it's going to take over the land. So in chapter 18, verse 6, Abraham ran into the tent to Sarah and said, gave her a little bit of your instructions. This is just not an instruction, it is a suggestion. How to be a successful wife. The Proverbs 31 wife. Hurry and make 3 measures of fine flour, knead it and make cakes. I think he was the cook in the house. And I think it shows his care and his intimate interaction. Sarah is mentioned as the mother of all nations here. What is Lot's wife's name? It's not Lottie. What's her name? Never mentioned. What is his daughters' names? Never mentioned. It's the younger and the older. They're not in relationship with our Father. So, if you want to have your name written down in the book of life, the only possible way to do it is to have your name written through the blood of Messiah in a covenantal relationship with Him. So, relating to Sarah, he makes him Abraham. If he takes care, because you know what, our existence is like concentric circles. It starts at the core, your relationship with the Father. And from there it grows into your wife, your children, your family. And nothing can penetrate that, not even messengers that you think is valuable. Lot brings into that concentric circle, he brings messengers, guests in, and he is able to extract his daughters and say, I'll throw them out because this looks like value. And if that is the life, or that is the kenmerk. What is a kenmerk in Engels? If that's the trademark or the character of a family or the city that you live in, there's no love in it. There's no trust, no relationship, no nothing. It's just what's valuable for me. It's all about me. So Lot mimics the hospitality of Abraham, but he's got nothing to give. So our lives. If we've got areas in our life that looks like Lot, and it looks like the behavior of Abraham, because we study Torah and we live in the realities of what the Word says, and we're trying to do that, but there's broken areas of our life that we cannot express love and trust to those, even those that are close to us, then we're in trouble. And we need to realize those things, and so that we can repair them, and that we can get the Father's ways properly established in our lives. So, if it's not the case, then the seed of righteousness in our lives are not viable and growing. So, if we live according to the values that the father of faith, Abraham, shown to us, then we're in a good place. But I think the other side of the coin is shown to us today in the life of the guys of Sedom and Gomorrah. And I think it's necessary to see it, because that is the opposite of life. In Abraham's life, everything goes about laughter and faithfulness and walking in the ways of our Father. In the neighbors, living in Sedom, it is about self. What is our value for me now? It's the character of death and everything else. And I think we do see some examples in the world today of exactly that's what's going on. The problem is, how do we deal with this? How do we do that in our own lives? How do we deal with the lives that we live among people that hasn't got the same values as what we have? So what is the minimum threshold? We live in a city of 221,000 people, according to the stats of 2022. What was the city of Sedom like? How many people were living in there? What do you think? Imagine. What do you think? How big was the city back in the day? 1,000 people? 1,200 people, that sort of a thing? 50, 1,200, 1,000. It's about 5%. 5% of the city. If it was 50 people, the city would have been saved. 221,000 people. How many people do we need? We only need Yeshua. But through our testimony, the city can be changed. So this is a call to us. If we live in a city that has got some of the values like Sedom and Gomorrah have, what was the essential problem with Sedom and Gomorrah? Ezekiel says it. It says that they had no need. They lived in luxury. And they had everything. Remember, they were living in paradise. That area doesn't really look like that if you visit them now. But back in Abraham's day, it was a valley with all the possible. It looked like Eden. And they were living they had no need of anything. So that's why they closed their doors to people that came to visit them, and they were unfriendly with them to the point where they wanted to hurt their guests, like in the case of Lot. And that grew into so much self-focused lust, almost, to gain things that's not yours, that it led to ungodly behavior and to sexual problems and to all sorts of issues. Do we see some of those sort of trademarks in George? I think George is the fastest growing city in South Africa. And if you think about all the development, the last stat I heard was about 65% of all activity in George is construction. Good for the builders. So, the problem is, what are the values of the people that's moving in? And what are our own values? Do we have some things that must be restored in our city in terms of the lives and values and so forth? I think we have got an urgent need, but what role do we play in that 221,000 people? Does that righteousness that the Father is showing in the Word, is it flourishing in George? Yeah, I think there's a presence of righteousness in George. I don't think it's flourishing. Lot only survived of his own testimony. He took his wife and daughters along. Do they appear to be righteous? I mean, look at the suggestion of his two daughters. They're not righteous. I've got my doubts about Lot. I've got a lot of doubts, actually. So, I'll stop with that now. It becomes a lot. So, what is the impact of our testimony, this fellowship's testimony in George? What is our impact? Is it the same impact that Abraham had in his household? Maybe not. Maybe we've got room for growth. But there's a seed placed in our hearts, in your heart, in my life, in your life, that can grow. And it can lead to laughter. Remember? In Sarah, the bride's life, there was a seed planted. And that seed, although it appeared that no life could come from her, life came and it became a mighty nation, bringing laughter. And Sarah's testimony in chapter 21 says, everyone who hears about this testimony will laugh with me, will be joyous with me. Matthew 25 says, the testimony of tzedakah, of righteousness, as we live it out in our daily behavior. If someone is poor, do you offer them something? If someone is in need, if naked, whatever. So that's the ways that the Father gives to us as a way to express in our daily lifestyle what we believe and what we think and how we live. I think there's a lot of things in our lives that must be realigned. Because as the crosswinds of everything comes over our life, we tend to get a little bit blown off course from time to time. We admit that. It's right. It is the way it is. But we should make teshuvah with every area of our life so that we can walk on this narrow path that leads to the kingdom at all cost. So there's a barometer in life, internationally. How are we doing internationally at this stage? If you look at the news and other media, what do you think are we like? A good barometer to use is this one. It's to look at our response to the people that's recognized as the people of our Father in Israel. And in this case, I think this was roughly, there it is. It's a stat between 2014 to 2019. I know I wasn't asked, but no worries. This is the stat. So it says, this is the adult population that was consulted, 33 million. 13 million of them had a negative concept about Israel. 38% of South Africa. So, what about the world? The world, 4.1 billion people who asked the same question, 26% of them responded negatively. Anti-Semitism. A recent stat, though, shows this. And it says, England, anti-Semitism in the last short while rose with 1,351. Listen properly. 1,351% in anti-Semitism. Germany, 240%. South Africa is one of the worst. It's 720% anti-Semitism rise. No, just now. And Austria is 300%. So, the darkness is increasing, it's intensifying. This is just a barometer of what's happening. It's not a reflection of personal choices and living in righteousness, but this, if we have got a very negative anti-Semitic concept in our lives, we know we are making choices against what the Word says. We must know it shows a trend in the lives of nations, and nations will be held accountable. So what is our contribution in changing that? So that's the end of my story, actually. But to end this off, I want to give you an assignment. This is a 10-minute assignment that we're going to do together. So you can put the faces and the names together as you like. You receive guests. You've got a neighborhood with a specific expression, and there are 3 guests coming to your gate. You're sitting on your stoep in the midday sun, it says. They're unexpected. You see them coming along, and you realize when you see them that these guys, like in Sedom, remember? Like we said that there are traits of Sedom in our area. Like in Sedom, there are 3 guests coming, and you see them and you realize that they are going to be desperately unwelcome in the rest of the neighborhood. Okay? Remember, there are choices to be made here. Which direction will we go? So, if we look at that, do we show hospitality first? And I was thinking examples, and I don't want to overburden the politics, but, even you're sitting on your stoop and you're looking at someone from another faith coming along, witnesses of a certain group. How do you respond to them? What do you say to them? Do you show hospitality? Or do you turn them around to the gate and say, "Go, I don't believe in the same stuff that you do"? How do you show hospitality? And what is the standard of the hospitality that we give? The same as Abraham? Sê toe, "Mommy, bak 3 broodjies. Gaan slag 'n kalf. Gaan melk die koei. Die kameel." So, what is the standard of hospitality that we do? And do you protect them? It is probably not the right word. Do you protect them at all costs when they are scolded or when they receive negative feedback from the rest of your group, from the people that you're in? Now, you could put faces to this. You can be sitting in a Jewish culture and there are Arabs coming along, or the opposite even, or the witnesses that we know of in our own expression. And think about this. Last Sunday, we spoke about the giftings of a prophet and a teacher, an encourager, and all else. So what we are going to do is we're going to divide in roughly 7 groups. And those that last week expressed that they've got a strong expression, or one of their strongest expressions, probably the prophetic expression. They're going to group together and look from a prophetic point of view. How are we going to deal with this problem? Are we going to align with Abraham? Are we going to align with Lot? Before I get there, I remember the 3rd story. I don't know if this is good news or bad news. It'll be 5 minutes. This is the good news. The 3rd story is about Avimelech. Remember? What happened? Just after the judgment on... Now, Abraham's got certain amount of experience now, because he interceded for Sedom and Gomorrah. His wifey has received the promise of a son twice now, in chapter 17 and 18. And he read the book. The problem is now he goes down to Avimelech. And when he arrives at Avimelech, he tells a story. The story is not entirely a lie, but it's not entirely truthful. The intention is to hide. Remember, he hides his relationship with his wife. With which one of these 2 expressions does he align? With the Abraham expression, the father of many nations, or the one that hides the testimony? Okay, so we don't start off too well. But now what happens from there on is that Avimelech now goes to bed. And he pretties up Sarah so long. He doesn't do anything to her, but he treats her well. Okay? So in that night, the father comes to him in a dream. And he says, "Hey, Avimelech, what are you doing? That's another man's wife. And I am going to come with a plague over your women and children and wives and daughters, so that no one will be fruitful. Remember the seed that's planted? No fruit anymore for you if you proceed in this direction." And Avimelech, hy word nie wakker nie, hy skrik wakker. It's, and when he wakes up, he realizes what's happening. He runs, or he goes to Abraham and he says, "What have you done to me? What's your story? What are you thinking about?" And Abraham, he comes out with a whole, in Afrikaans het 'n sak patats. Ek weet nie wat dit in Engels is nie. Bag of not potatoes. Sweet potatoes. So what happens is the father protects. Avimelech tells his people, all the people are frightened. They know what happened in Sedom and Gomorrah. They are frightened and they stick to the message and the righteousness that is now Avimelech's. Avimelech says, I'm standing back. I'm sorry, I didn't know this. I had integrity. You know my heart, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I didn't do anything wrong. I was lied to. And now I know the truth. I will stand back. I even will bless this man. I will bless this man. And the people turn around. Abraham and his family is blessed. Avimelech, all his wives, his wife and all his daughters and everybody else are healed from this plague that came upon them. And he receives a gift. They are enabled to grow. So that story aligns with what could have been the case in Sedom. They're not believers in our Father. They're a foreign culture, but they act righteously. Avimelech act righteously. Sedom didn't. They were judged. Avimelech saw that what our Father has done, the testimony has reached him, and they act righteously. So I just thought that story lines up so nicely with what could have been Sedom and Gomorrah's. So, and you know what would have happened is we would have gone to Sedom and Gomorrah today and went as visitors and looked and walked around in a beautiful valley, fruitful, beautiful place, not needing a restoration. But because they sinned and they acted against their Father, they were judged and taken out, and the whole earth in that area was judged too.